Hi, welcome to the Delve podcast. I'm Allie.
And I'm Adam.
I am a staff therapist here at Delve Psychotherapy of Chicago. My background before getting into the field of counseling was in the entertainment industry. Quite the journey, which I'm sure we'll get more into as the life of this podcast moves forward. I'm fairly new to the Delve team, but I feel like I've learned so much from Adam and the other counselors here so far. And I really just want everyone to hear more about like what we're doing here and all the ideas. And I feel like we bring so much value, I hope so much value to our clients. And I feel like this is just the right platform to share some of what we're doing.
I hope so, and I'm so happy to hear that it's been a good experience so far. So I'm Adam Fominaya. I did not begin in the entertainment industry. I've been doing psychology stuff for a very long time now, in completing a master's in clinical psychology and then a PhD in clinical psychology, and starting this practice during the pandemic specifically. I've sort of had an incredible opportunity to see not only how the field itself operates from nearly every possible perspective, including training and research and education, the practical clinical work. Not only have I had an opportunity to do that, but then I've also had the opportunity to see what it's like to try to get a practice up and off the ground, and to try to train the next generation of therapists. So I have put a lot of thought into how to do this work well, and I'm just really excited to share with anyone who's interested in hearing us out some of the perspectives we've gained as we've gone along. I think that there are a number of different ways to practice psychotherapy, and I think ours is interesting, and that's all the more that we would ask for you, is to consider what's interesting here and take what you like and leave what you don't. I also think that this podcast can be really useful for the general public. So we're not necessarily just aiming this at the psychotherapists in the world or anybody who's seasoned or practiced or anything of that nature. We want to talk about these concepts in a way that's accessible to everyone, and I truly believe that we can deliver that. So here we go, Allie.
Here we go. Yeah, and I mean, I feel like you kind of just touched on it, but like just the purpose of this podcast, I feel like we're just really passionate about getting these ideas out there. And I would love to be every single person's therapist, but that's not feasible or possible.
You got to protect against some therapist burnout there.
Right. And so with this podcast, it's like we can reach people, not just the people that we are able to have individual therapy or group therapy with, but like people in other states, people in other countries even. So I think that's really powerful.
Absolutely. And I'm excited for the opportunity for us to just push these ideas out and share and learn ourselves. I think this is going to be great.
Yeah. Exciting. So I would love for you to talk more about the Delve model. I think when I was like looking for a private practice to work for, I loved this like integrated, depth-oriented approach that really was intriguing to me. And I think it would be really valuable for everyone listening to like hear more about like what our model is.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So firstly, maybe I could give a little bit of a background about how it developed. So when I was coming through school, frankly, I don't think I was that good a therapist. As I was going through my PhD program and learning the craft, I know that I was picking up skills along the way. But I think that the ways that I was thinking and the ways that I was operating really were an impediment to the way that I could truly reach people. And that's not to say I didn't have good sessions and great successes with clients all along the way. And I can remember those from every year that I practiced. But there was something missing in terms of how to organize this in my brain. When I was on internship, I had an incredible crew of supervisors on internship, and one mentor in particular that was basically a father figure to me that year, that really cultivated this sense of try to figure out for yourself what it is, like solve this problem. How are you wanting to think about this work? And I think that his name was Mark. I think Mark in particular showed me the way with regard to depth orientation. There is such a thing as depth therapy. We've been calling this depth oriented because it is a little bit different than the historical kind of depth therapy approach. Perhaps we can get into that sometime, but in terms of depth orientation, we're saying that rather than trying to solve problems or fix symptoms or anything of that nature, our goal is to aim for deeper stuff, that we want to know more about who this person really is, what their story is, what they're trying to accomplish in their lives, and understand that on a deep and meaningful level, and help them understand that on a deep and meaningful level as best we can. So that's the depth orientation part, is to kind of aim toward deeper stuff at the beginning. Maybe I'll stop there before I get into the integrative part. What do you think of that so far?
Yeah, I love that approach. It's not just about like fixing these problems as they come up, or just like trying to figure out these solutions on a surface level, but like really about like growth of the human person. Because I feel like that equates to more lasting change than just
Absolutely. And cohesion with the self. I love change. Change is great, and maybe we are trying to change. But even I've had clients in the past where we've analyzed whatever the circumstances are, we've explored the issues, we've tossed them over together in this kind of deeper way, and at the end of the day, the decision is I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. But now I've got a greater sense of self as I do it. This is something that I'm choosing with intention, having a clear understanding and clarity of vision for why I'm choosing it. So change is wonderful, and change is inevitable.
Right.
But I think having that kind of certainty of vision matters a lot, and you get that by having a deep understanding of yourself and where you fit in the world around you.
Yeah. Not just going about your life like in a way that's just like you're not consciously like making choices that fit with who you are and who you want to be and what you want your life to look like. I feel like a lot of people just kind of like go about life in this like on autopilot almost.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And they don't mean to, of course. That's why
Right.
it's autopilot. But you think about what's required to, let's say we want to make choices that are really deeply consistent with ourselves and really consistent with the way that we mean to live our lives.
Yeah.
That requires that you've got some skill at making choices, that you have a deep understanding of yourself, and you have a deep understanding of what you're trying to accomplish. That's hard.
It is hard. Yeah, no, I wonder, like, if you were to walk up to people on the street and ask, like, do you feel like you have a deep understanding of yourself and who you are? I feel like a lot of people would be like, no, I don't know. I don't think so.
Then why are you talking to me? We don't talk to strangers in this country.
Right. Right.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that even just the depth oriented portion of this alone is really valuable. And there are tons of psychotherapy approaches. That's where the integrative piece comes in. When we're talking about trying to pull together a number of different ideas, there are a number of different ways to practice the discipline and to practice depth specifically. So the integrative portion of the integrated depth oriented model that Delve uses comes from the Handbook of Psychotherapy Integration. Hold on, it's right behind me. The Comprehensive Handbook of Psychotherapy Integration. It was published by Stricker and Gold back in the 80s. There are other handbooks of psychotherapy integration that were published later, but they tended to focus a bit more on integrating from, let's say, like cognitive behavioral, acceptance and commitment oriented lenses specifically, whereas I thought this book back in the 80s did a really nice job of pulling from a number of different perspectives. And when I was coming through graduate school, I got a hold of this book and I started to read it. And early in its chapters, it introduces this idea of there being 6 domains of psychotherapy, with a domain kind of being something of like a sphere of functioning, or a sphere of kind of psychological experience, a playground on which psychology can play out. Some examples would be brains think. So cognitions is one of the domains. Brains have emotions. So affect or emotions is another one of them. And we can get into what some of the others are. But as they were as they were introducing these concepts in the book, my experience of it anyway was that they were saying there are a number of different ways to integrate. One of them is to kind of take pieces from different approaches to therapy, but primarily kind of wed yourself to one theoretical approach. Here's how I'm thinking about things theoretically, and to pull in little skills or maybe slight perspectives from these other sources. That was one approach. Another would be to say that you could try to come up with a comprehensive theory that integrates at the theoretical level both approaches. And I know this gets a little esoteric, but the idea being, am I taking pieces from all of these things, or am I truly trying to blend them together? And it felt to me like they were sort of tipping their hand that most people wouldn't bother to try to integrate at that comprehensive theoretical level. So it almost felt hand waved away, like, that's hard, so don't worry about it. Integrate just by like grabbing skills. To me, that's the idea.
Yeah.
That's the thing that we needed to do. And I set out to do that by really trying to think about, how do these domains, if such a thing exists, how do they play together? How can we really think about what they're doing together? Why it matters for clients. And then I also added 2 domains, which we can get into what the specific domains are. But that's broad strokes where the integrative piece comes into play. We're trying to grab from a number of different perspectives, giving the clinician a number of different ways of approaching any particular client on any particular issue. It's just options.
Yeah. Yes. As I was going through my master's program, I felt like a pressure to like pick a side, like pick like, okay, what is my like main perspective here? Like, do I like CBT best? Do I like the psychoanalytic perspective? And as I was learning, I was actually like, hey, a lot of these different theorists, like, they all have pretty good ideas, and I don't want to pick one. Like, why, if I have all these like evidence-backed, like effective approaches, why am I not utilizing all of the options that are available, especially if like a different approach is better suited for this particular client, and then this client, like a different approach is more suitable for what they're going through. It seems like a disservice to clients if we aren't using all of the options available to us.
Right. I mean, one of the things that I've also suggested in the past is that if you, let's say a particular clinician loves a particular theoretical orientation, I am a straight cognitive therapist or something like that, I would argue that you can be that in a way that is still consistent with the integrative depth-oriented delve model idea here.
Totally.
They essentially are just saying, we're going to focus on one of the particular domains. And I'd say that's fine. The only caveat I would add is, if you're open to trying a couple of these other perspectives, you can often bring them along for the ride, do a little bit of some of this other work at the same time, and it'll make your work more effective. For instance, from a strict cognitive perspective, a typical thought record in a cognitive perspective would essentially be taking a maladaptive negative belief, maybe a core belief, and asking you to challenge it so that you can shift the emotional experience that you're having. And that's fine. That's wonderful. Cognitive therapy, we love it. It's great.
Right.
But very often you do end up getting stuck with clients where they're like, yeah, I just don't believe it. Or you'll end up getting stuck with clients where they'll say something like, I mean, it felt better for a little while, but then it went back.
Right.
Um, uh, I know that this doesn't make any sense, but I still feel bad. That's the line that really got me thinking about, like, why not just a straight CBT approach? If you practice a straight CBT approach, you will have a client that says that at some point, I promise you.
Yeah. No,
So I'm sorry.
I think like that's so true in the sense of like if you're only looking at a client from like how you're saying from this like CBT lens, it can be really easy to get stuck. Um, this way, in an integrated approach where you have other perspectives to pull from, there's always a different way to look at something, and it's like less likely that you'll feel as stuck with the client because there's just more to explore.
Absolutely. And then it can help. Let's say you're really wedded to that thought record approach. If we spent a little time saying, like, well, where did this belief actually come from? Who taught you this? And how did it come from? Whose ideas maybe have you incorporated and internalized as something within yourself, which is somewhat kind of psychodynamic in nature?
Yeah.
You may find that you get a little more purchase when you start trying to help them shift those beliefs. Because then you're not just saying, like, well, why logically does this belief not hold? You might even be saying, like, your former tennis coach isn't someone that you now respect, and that's a reason to not hold on to these beliefs that they taught you with quite so much fervor. Now let's talk about why they're also not logical. And then maybe we've also done some emotion work too, so that we more deeply understand the person's actual experience of that emotion. And doing those three things may make the thought record work even easier, even more effective. If it doesn't, that's great. And if you're, crushing it with your thought records every day, great, go do it. But if you're finding that you're stuck and want to see if there's a way to kind of broaden out your options, that's what we're trying to teach.
Yeah. Would you like to go ahead and just lay out what the 8 domains are?
Let's see if we can remember them together, Allie.
Okay.
Yeah, so the first I would touch on is what we call psychodynamics. That's usually not referred to in that way. There is such a thing as psychodynamic psychotherapy. Comes out of psychoanalytic psychotherapy. That's Freud and Anna Freud and many others that came along through the years. Psychodynamics, I don't know, should we define each one or what? I guess we got time, right?
Yeah, we got time.
All right, we'll go quick. So psychodynamics in general is about how do early life events get incorporated into our understanding of the world. Call that an internal working model. And how does that internal working model affect the way that we now interact with and perceive the world around us? So that's psychodynamics. Maybe I'll give you a chance to speak on each of these if you want to as we go through.
Sure. And we talked a bit about cognition. So that's like the way that we're thinking and how our thoughts affect our mental health. What are the automatic thoughts that we're having? How can we challenge our like distorted thinking? That sort of thing.
And also, what biases do we bring to the table, and how do those affect us? We were talking you earlier. You were talking about that pressure to pick a side.
Yeah.
I mean, there's such a thing as an in-group, out-group bias, and that's a thing that affects the way that we end up making choices. It affects the way that we end up establishing careers. So, can we have an understanding of the biases that we might be bringing to the table? So that's cognitions. Yeah. Emotions, obviously. I will go ahead and shout out Lisa Barrett's work. If you haven't followed Lisa Barrett's YouTube channel, it's excellent. And her book, How Emotions Are Made, is a wonderful foundation for a deeper understanding of how emotions work. Essentially, when we are working with emotion, I tend to think about how can we bring emotion into the room, feel it in the session, and explore what this person's experience of the emotion is over time. There's much more to it, and we'll have a chance to kind of get
Yeah,
into
totally.
emotion stuff, especially.
Yeah. Behavior. I feel like we take a little more modern approach than like the classical approach to like behavior therapy. I feel like it's
Agreed.
more about what are we doing, and is is what we're doing in line with like our goals and what we actually want for our lives? Is that, would you say
Yeah,
that's accurate?
that's generally what I would say for sure. Behavioral therapy has an interesting, complicated past. And I think that there are many people that are still practicing applied behavior analysis,
Yeah.
etc. Again, I think these people are doing wonderful work, and I'm in no way throwing shade. I would say that the our particular approach is to try to think more about values-driven action,
Yeah.
which ends up meaning that some element of our behavior work ends up kind of coming through ACT perspectives, but also gets into theories on motivation and things of that nature. So,
Yeah.
so that would be the behavior component. Let's see what we're missing. Physiology.
Hmm.
So if I think that psychotherapists struggle a bit to think about the way that the body and movement end up impacting and is a part of the psychological experience. You talk to any yogic practitioner, they're keenly aware of this, and they're teaching this every day in their yogic practices. But I think that we struggle sometimes as a field to really incorporate these into our discipline. And this is as simple as like paying attention to a client's body language or our own body language in a given moment, and sometimes just asking them to shift in their chair slightly. You see a client that's like wilted and bent over,
Yeah.
maybe even almost hugging themselves, asking them to sit back, open their chest up, maybe lift their arms, raise their arms up. If you do this sort of thing, especially in an emotionally tense moment, you may find that it leads to a pretty palpable difference in the way that you're presenting in session and the way that you're meeting the present moment.
Yeah.
So,
And I feel like that aspect is often overlooked. So I feel like that's really important.
absolutely. I'll add on the physical front. I also do a lot of thinking about the impact of things like hormones and substances,
Yeah.
and how are they impacting the ways that we're thinking, behaving, feeling. I worked out maybe 2 days ago or something like that. That's certainly going to affect the way that I move. Is the way that I'm moving now affecting the way that I'm thinking, affecting the way that I'm feeling, affecting the way that I interact with my partner? Things of that nature. So that's
Yes.
the physiology component.
Yeah. There's also this sociocultural aspect. So it's kind of thinking about the different systems that are affecting us on the day to day. Are we aware of the way that systems are impacting us and the barriers that we're facing? How much do we want to like fight against these forces? Yeah, anything else you'd like to add to that piece?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that so systems is one of the two domains that I added to the Stricker in gold
Mm,
model. Because I think in the modern age, we are thinking more about how does an individual interact with these broader systems and structures in the world. That could be a political system, that could be a workplace, that could be a economic system, or even just familial dynamics or neighborhood dynamics, etc. So where do we fit in relative to these broader systems, and how do we interact with them? How do they affect us, and how do we interact with them? For
yes.
sure. So yeah, systems. The other one that I added was the concept of identity, which I
Mhm.
think has been a major force in psychology in the last several decades specifically. So no wonder it wasn't paid as much attention to in the 80s.
Mhm.
But I do need to relate to these systems, and I need to relate to other people, which is the last one, relational.
Yes.
But we also need to relate to ourselves. And I have some concept of self. I have some experience of self. How does that develop? How does that affect me? Where does that concept of self come from?
Yeah.
And how can we explore some of its nuances as well?
Yeah. That's one of my favorites to work from, the identity domain.
I agree.
So then we have the last one, which is the relational domain, and that's really just looking at how we are interacting with others.
Yeah. Yep. How do we behave in a relational sense? How do I perceive them, but also what do I do in relation to them? What do I ask for? What do I offer? And what do I feel when I'm around them? Yeah, that's the relational approach, which I think I got a lot of training in relational psychotherapy along the way. Oh man, I love it. And the here and now stuff in the room in a psychological in a psychotherapy session can be so incredibly rich.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and they talk about how like in therapy, that therapeutic relationship can be like a microcosm of like how the client is interacting with others in the world, and how can we show them like a new relationship within therapy.
Absolutely. The idea of kind of a corrective relational experience. And then we get into some of those dynamics like transference and countertransference, which essentially what does the client sort of imprint on us or project onto us? Project is probably the better word.
Yes.
And what do we project onto them? So when I'm teaching students this, I'll often ask, when you're working with client X, does it feel more like a parent-child relationship? Does it feel more like a brother-sister relationship? Are we buddies? Like, what is the general feeling of this relationship? And then how can we make that useful? And are you feeling that from them, or are you feeling that from yourself?
Right.
If you have an annoying little brother, and then you have a younger male-identified client, do you notice yourself starting to relate to them in a like annoying little younger brother kind of way? It may be just in your head. It might just be something that you as the clinician are feeling in your head. But how's that start to play out? And then how can you begin to make that useful to yourself and to them?
Definitely. Oh my gosh. It tells you so much. All right.
So the other thing that I wanted to say about the model itself, because that's just a list of domains right now, right? And we're saying like there's a bunch of domains and think about things deeply. That's not quite a kind of theory yet. The way that we think about this is if there are 8 domains of psychotherapy or 8 domains of psychology, then you could think of each of those domains as distinct but heavily interrelated. So each one is its own thing, but it is deeply integrated, which if you think about the way that the brain works, that's the way the brain works. That's what neurons are doing, is they are in these little gray matter pockets with white matter tracks all over the place. So if we think about these domains as being distinct but heavily interrelated, then I take the position that all 8 are deeply interrelated with one another, and that problems or concerns or points of stuckness for a client could arise out of any of the 8 domains. I might be having a hard time in my relationships. I might be struggling with motivation. So that would be either the relational or maybe perhaps the behavioral domain. That could be the source of difficulty, but that any of the domains can be the source of healing. So you can approach, let's say somebody struggling with motivation, you could take that head on and just focus on just the behaviors themselves. How do we get this person motivated to do their things? And in that way, you can use this kind of intra-domain approach to try to help somebody through whatever stuck point they are. But you can also take other approaches, and you'll see clinicians every day doing this. The client will say, I'm struggling with motivation, which lives in the behavioral domain, I would say. And you could say, well, how are we thinking about this? Or what are you feeling while that's happening? All right, so now we're getting into cognitions or emotion. Where did this come from? What was the history of it? So now maybe we're getting into the psychodynamics. What does this make you believe about yourself? Now we're getting into the identity domain. There are a bunch of different ways in to beginning to interact with this idea. And I would say that if the problems can arise in any of the 8 domains and they are all integrated with one another, then the source of healing can come from any of the 8, which frees up the clinician to, you can start wherever you like. maybe there are particular approaches that you're more comfortable with. It's fine to start there and see how that plays with the client. Then if you find that you're stuck at some point along the way, you've got room to pivot. You've got 7 more options to choose from. So if you operate on your natural inclinations, the areas and techniques and approaches that tend to work best for you, and they're working with you and the client, and you're both, noticing that growth,
Yeah.
wonderful. But if you get stuck, you can move, and there's always another option to take. And that feeling of stuckness can be the signal to you to maybe take a different approach, which hopefully you've got some tricks available to you now.
Yeah, try a different domain. And I think something you've said to me is like, try not to take the obvious domain in this situation. Like, yeah, if somebody is struggling with like relational dynamics and how they're interacting with others, like you can just go ahead and like take that perspective and work on relational improving your relational dynamics. Or you can look at it from an emotions perspective or cognitive perspective or identity. What do you believe about yourself, in these moments? So yeah.
I'm curious in your experience doing that and learning that this year in particular, have you noticed what that does? What effect does that have when you're working with clients as you're kind of getting started with that, taking that less obvious approach?
Yes, I feel it surprises me, and I think the client too, because I think more things are revealed and more insight happens and more things come up than just taking the obvious approach. And in this sort of like taking this sort of other door, this like side door, sometimes is what is needed for the change to happen or for growth to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I that's my experience of it too. And I love the number of times when if the person's having some disagreements with their romantic partner, and your first thought might be, let's just fix these communication issues between the two of them. Sometimes I still do this in my practice too, so I'm not saying that I'm immune to it. But when I'm successful at taking that other approach, and maybe we take a psychodynamic perspective and we really explore the history of relationships and how this person put these together, you spend a half hour or 3 sessions exploring, like, where is this coming from? How are you viewing relationships? What were these early life relationships like, and what did that change? How did that change the way that you view what relationships are? You often get back to that present moment where you're able to say, like, okay, can you just stop arguing with your partner? Which, if I just said that right from the start, that wouldn't work. It's too simple, it's too obvious. But if I've got all this history that shows you why you're doing that, and we both have that shared understanding of why that's happening, then I can say that line. Of course, the client's not just going to overnight stop, but it's got that punch, it's got that it works, because now we both get where this is coming from, what function it's having in this person's life, and we're clear on the mission. And that brings greater awareness to even the conflicts that person might be having in those relationships in the present day.
Yeah. I love it. I found that it's been really effective with clients. I feel like it takes us places that we didn't expect, and I feel like they're really appreciative of just like seeing them as like a holistic person and not just like, I don't know, a problem that needs to be fixed. Just like, just seeing things from so many different perspectives just gives it more, I don't know, like more of just seeing the person as more of a whole person.
Yeah, it's got a richness to it. It's got a depth to it, of course, on brand for us. And it feels more fleshed out, which gives us so many more places to go, especially for long-term psychotherapy work.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right. So with this model in mind, I thought it would be fun to take some Reddit questions and see.
Yeah, in getting into Reddit, we were trying to figure out like how can we get some real world examples of some of our perspectives
Yes.
into this podcast format and try to help people answer some real questions that they might really be struggling with. I will also say when I check out Reddit and people are asking for advice on relationships or whatever else, wow, there are some complicated situations. So
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
I feel like we should take on the challenging ones and see if we can offer
definitely.
some perspectives. This is not psychotherapy. This is no replacement for psychotherapy. We're not telling people what to do or providing any guidance, legal or psychological or otherwise. We're just sort of exploring general ideas and maybe taking some perspectives on something that was published publicly.
Yeah. Hopefully we can help some people out there, and hopefully anyone listening can relate to some of these questions, and it'll help you as well.
Yeah. So what are we getting into? What are we going to answer?
Okay. So this first one, the title is How Do I Explain Therapy to Someone Who Just Doesn't Get It? Okay, so I'm a 27-year-old woman, and I've been dealing with mental health issues since I was 14. This includes multiple rounds of inpatient treatment when I was 19 to 20 years old. I'm now a lot better, but still struggle with depression, ADHD, and some other stuff. The problem is that my dad doesn't really understand my mental health issues or why I continue to see a therapist. It was a bit easier for him to understand when I was much worse, but now that I'm a lot more functional, finished my degree, I haven't been an inpatient in years, it just makes no sense to him that I continue to see my therapist. He'll try to be encouraging and say things like, you know, you don't need therapy, which I think speaks to his lack of understanding. Like he thinks it's like a pep talk that I'm going because I feel I must, not because I actually get benefit from it. So how do I explain generally the benefit of continued therapy? Why it's useful and why it's a regular, ongoing process. My dad tries his hardest to understand, but I'm struggling to find a way to explain it both generally and from my perspective.
Mm. I think it's such a rich question,
Yeah.
and I think it's such a familiar one as well. Like if we're thinking about systems, one of the systems is this sort of systemic change over time with respect to the comfort and familiarity with psychotherapy. And I do notice some generational changes happening over time that there's many people, I think, struggling to have a conversation like this with a parent or an older family member. That's not to say I think many older adults obviously and clearly understand the value that psychotherapy can offer. I wondered if you had any initial perspectives. I've got a few to bring to bear here.
Oh man. I suppose does he need to understand?
Does he need to understand? That was where I went too.
Yeah. I mean, um of course it's nice to have familial support in what you're doing, and if you're seeking therapy, but like if it's something that benefits you, and there was a portion I didn't really get into, but it says that she pays for 90% of her own treatment, and she does ask for occasional help when she's like really struggling financially, but for the most part she's, you know, self-funding this. It's not like her dad is paying for all of her treatment. So I guess I suppose it's, yeah, it comes to a question of like, does he need to understand? Do you need to take on the plight of explaining to him the benefits of therapy if he's not the one in it and he's not the one getting the benefits? I don't know.
But I feel so invalidated every time he makes one of these comments about me just going and getting a pep talk and I'm fine. It feels so invalidating, right?
Right. Yes. And I feel like I use that a lot in therapy, this like yes and approach,
Yeah.
which is like an improv
Yeah,
thing.
well, yeah, we've both done improv, so there's that.
Yes, it does feel invalidating, and that sucks. And I feel like how much do we need to how much does his opinions and his own beliefs about therapy need to like have a heavy weight in your experience of it? Do we
Yeah.
need to, like, does his opinion need to have such high stakes?
Right. Yeah. It's kind of that, I think, the Buddhist perspective of attachment. So this thing is happening or this dynamic is happening, but there is a personal choice to incorporate that into self and decide that it matters.
Right.
And of course, we have that kind of reactive experience of dad says an invalidating thing, and I feel that, of course. At the same time, I spend a lot of time in therapy trying to help people see that a lot of the drive is to convince the other person to have your perspective, especially in couples and family work. How do I convince this other person? Are you sure you need to? Because at the same time, what actually changes if this person never shifts their opinion? What actually changes? You'll still be doing the thing that you're doing. You're still going to go to therapy. You're still going to get the support that you need. And they haven't agreed to agree yet. So there's very much this idea of like, what is the best way to convince? When in fact, maybe what we can place our focus on is acceptance and an understanding that not everybody's going to get us, not everybody's going to understand. And how can I walk through life more accepting of that difference, even with people who love me, care about me, have supported me in the past, and sometimes say invalidating things. I wish that we could convince everyone. We'll fail. If we take that approach, we will fail to convince. I'm sure of it.
Yeah. And I just think it's a lot to have to go through life trying to convince everybody of something that you
or at least key people. Sure.
Yeah, at least, yes, your family. And I get that these people mean more to you than others, but like that's a lot to put on yourself. And so there's a lot of freedom, I feel like, and relief in just this idea of acceptance, accepting that some people just aren't going to get it, even your dad.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in that, going back to the kind of 8-domain approach, the relational move here might be to shift the way that we're interacting with dad, not to convince. We're shifting our aims. And instead of aiming to convince dad, we're aiming to make choices that are consistent with the self, that are consistent with the mission, preserve the importance of the relationship. But aren't necessarily trying to shift his view. The one thing we don't have control over is the way that other people think. So how can we deal with that reality and shift our relational actions to better fit the circumstance, their stated beliefs, and our goals? It sucks because I want to convince all my family members too, and I'm not saying I ain't tried, but there is something of a futility to it as well. We won't succeed. And in that, I also think that there's a relationship with one's own emotions. So we can take an emotions perspective, and how can we as an individual interact with the experience of invalidation? When someone else invalidates, what does that bring up for us? What automatic drives might we have as a reaction to the experience of invalidation? And how can we interact with our experience of invalidation? Because that's all happening within me. Dad's done nothing. I'm having this experience of invalidation. I'm relating to my own invalidation. I'm producing drives and plans and actions within myself as a reaction to that invalidation. How do I deal with that invalidation internal to thyself?
Yes, I love that. We can even look psychodynamically and like when did we feel invalidated as a child, and is some of that coming up even now?
And was dad the one that was sort of around in the moments that happened?
Yes.
Was anybody else? What was grandpa like?
So many rich perspectives here. All right, let's move on to the next question, shall we?
Yes. Oh, well, and one more bit on that too. There was some comment in there about needing psychotherapy. Why do you need psychotherapy? I think dad maybe offered that.
Yes.
I don't think of psychotherapy as a need. Um, I think it is a useful way to explore really interesting ideas. I think it can be extremely growth promoting. I buy this product, I sell this product, I love this product. Psychotherapy is a useful, valuable, I think sometimes damn near magical thing.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's a need. Maybe I need closeness, maybe I need understanding, maybe I need belonging, value, direction, purpose. Those are needs, but I could get those in other places. And psychotherapy, while I love it, and I encourage people to try it out, especially our approach, I don't think it in and of itself is something that anyone needs. And I think that gets lost in all of this. You need to go to therapy. Do they? Perhaps you would like X person to have a different perspective or experience. Perhaps you're spotting some things that they could grow in, but therapy is not the only way to learn that. And historically, throughout the history of humanity, psychotherapy didn't exist. So people were learning some of these things from elders, from family members, just figuring it out themselves, or perhaps not at all, and living full and complete and rich lives without having some of this growth and learning. So I love this product. Buy this product so that you can grow. I think it's really effective, but it isn't by itself a need, I don't think.
Yes. Yeah, I love switching that language there and switching that perspective. All right.
Question number 2.
I love this one. Okay. Is it too late to start dating?
Mhm.
I, 26-year-old male, have never dated anyone, whether from lack of interest or insecurity. I've never had a girlfriend. I've never pursued a relationship. Never anything casual either. Partially because I never felt I needed a relationship, and partially because I never felt I deserved one. But I can't get the thought out of my head, the desire to have a partner to share my life with. Is it still worth starting this late? And I don't even mean from a time perspective, although that is part of it. I mean from an effort and vulnerability perspective. If I want to start dating, that means breaking my routine, opening myself up to a lot of potential pain. And I'm pretty sensitive, so this could do some serious damage to me. I've never tried online dating, and I don't want to, because from what I can tell, that's exactly the kind of environment that would F me up. There's nothing really wrong with me, but I'm not exactly the cream of the crop either. So, is it worth it, really? Or might I just be better off focusing on other sources of happiness in my life?
Wow. I mean, I think we both can hear in that those self-beliefs
Yeah.
that are really it's a very damning perspective of who one is, who the person sees themselves as, and an obvious target if we're kind of exploring this is to begin the process of really exploring where those beliefs come from, where that language comes from, and how we could potentially start to shift some of those perspectives. Because I mean, I don't know that I would assign some of those beliefs to any person,
No.
and I'm quite sure that with some examination, we could probably find some of the origins of some of those beliefs and experiences, and start to shift those.
Yeah, it made me sad to read some of the ways that this person feels about themselves. And so yeah, exploring from like identity perspective of like who this person feels like they are, and maybe even from like a psychodynamic perspective, exploring like where these beliefs about themselves originated. It's very heartbreaking.
Yeah, absolutely. And likely incorrect. But if we go back to the perspective that we were offering earlier, if we just start with well, that's clearly not true, and we challenge this person right from the off and say, like, no, that's not the belief, don't have that belief, we haven't necessarily done the rest of the work that I think could really support us in working through. There's an entire network of emotional, psychological, historical experience that is supporting those beliefs. And for my take, if this was a psychotherapy, it's not, it's a Reddit question, but if this was psychotherapy, we have to kind of deal with that undergrowth. We have to kind of deal with that structure underneath of it. And that's, what comments did people make about you earlier in life? How do you relate to some of these emotions? One thing that I hear in this question is very much like these negative, maybe I should say these unpleasant emotional experiences can fuck me up. Wow, that's a lot of power to give to emotions. They are just emotions at the end of the day. And also do a lot of damage. That phrase stuck out to me, do a lot of damage. Surgery does a lot of damage. It just also does a lot of healing. And
that's a good metaphor. Yes.
And I think about the value of taking some of those hits. The value of, I mean, you can't date and not get hurt. You can't date and not hurt others. It just is a part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than the question being, is it worth it to date? Yeah. Is it worth it to have some of those unpleasant experiences, difficult nights, tears shed in pursuit of growth and finding yourself? My argument would be yes, absolutely. At the same time, I think every individual person, and this person specifically, gets to choose whether they want to take that on. And some people do decide, like, it's not something that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
So that's fair enough.
Yeah. What I think of when I read this question too is it's like, if, being in a romantic long-term partnership is important to you, if that's one of your big goals, then yes, pursue it.
Go,
and
do
it's
it.
going to hurt. I don't think that anyone comes out of the dating game unscathed. If they do, they're very, very lucky. But I feel like that's just part of the shtick. That's part of what it is.
Absolutely.
And it's going to hurt. And there's going to be ups and downs, and do it anyway if it's important to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's true of pursuit of any of one's major goals, needs, or values, is that somewhere along the way, it's going to get painful. It's going to get difficult. You're going to experience impedances. There's no way around that.
Yeah.
I don't believe that life is about trying to avoid pain. I think we'll fail if we try to take that approach.
Yeah.
I think the better pursuit is, how can we pursue those things that are ultimately very important to us?
Mm-hmm.
How can we generally pursue those things and accept some of the pain that will come along the way, which is some of the emotions work that we've been talking about, is not only can we understand the emotions and experience the emotions, but grow more comfortable with them. Because at the end of the day, it is just an emotion. That it can be painful, it can be scary, it can be overwhelming, but it doesn't do anything else by itself. It is just an emotion. They're important, they matter, and they kind of don't, because the rest of psychology is that then I start making choices, then I start making plans, then I have the rest of my psychological experience and drives and elections, and all of those options are available to me to meet the present moment and my emotions as I intend to. And that's some of the work that we might be able to do from that kind of emotions perspective.
Definitely. Like letting the emotions exist, and then we get to decide how we want to interact with them.
Absolutely. And gaining awareness of what they are, gaining language in describing them, explicating them more deeply, and getting into some of the associative awareness of, like, what else am I experiencing along with this emotion, and what else does it remind me of, and how does it connect to other psychological experiences and histories? All of that. Is it worth it to date? Probably. And if it's really important to you, then absolutely. 26 ain't too late.
Yeah, it's not too late.
It is possible to go through these experiences and be okay. I don't think we have to be afraid of it.
Yeah.
I would say that if this is new, if this is something that you haven't done much before, it is valuable to do it with support from others, and talk about your experiences as you go along, because it's very complicated and super confusing. So getting support. There was also that comment in there about, would it be better for me to just explore all the rest of my interests and build out the rest of my life, something like that. Do you have that quote?
Yes, or might I just be better off focusing on other sources of happiness in my life?
Do both. Focus on the other sources of happiness in your life. Build out your friendships and hobbies and experiences and work and professional goals. Do all of that and date. Why are we choosing one or the other? We can do both.
Definitely. Need a full life.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Last question. This one is also a relationship question. Ooh, okay. This one's juicy. They're perfect on paper, so why don't you feel the spark?
Ugh,
All right.
spark.
I like how this person wrote this question too.
Mm.
All right. So you finally meet someone who checks all the boxes. They're kind, attractive, have a great job, treat you well, and even share your love for that one really specific hobby, in parentheses. Seriously, how many people are that into competitive marble racing? On paper, they're exactly what you've been looking for. And yet you feel nothing. No butterflies, no excitement, just a polite, yeah, they're nice. At first, you think maybe you just need more time. Attraction can grow, right? But date after date, that spark just isn't there. And now you're stuck asking yourself, am I being too picky? Am I sabotaging a perfectly good relationship? Or worse, is there something wrong with me? The truth is, chemistry isn't always logical. You can't force that natural, I can't wait to see them again feeling, no matter how perfect someone seems. And honestly, that's okay. The tricky part is deciding whether to give it more time or to move on, because let's be real, great people don't come around every day. So, what do you do in this situation? Have you ever been with someone who seemed ideal but just didn't feel right? Did you push through or walk away?
That is extremely well written. And I also really love how much of it is self-referential, because it could be so easy for the person to start pointing the finger at the other person and trying to describe all the ways that they're not enough, or they can't this, or they aren't that. This person keeps coming back to, what is this saying about me and how I'm meeting this present moment? It's so valuable.
Yes. I love that there's a lot of, self-reflection in this. And I know you have some perspectives on this idea of chemistry.
I do. All right, I'll get into it. Well,
or wherever you want to start. Yeah.
Sure. No, I think that in general, there's this tone in this question, and I hear it with a lot of clients and people, that these emotions are sort of evincing some truth. They're showing us something real about the world. They're revealing something about me or them or something about the world. And my emotions are the thing that is ultimately giving me some truth. And so this idea that having or not having the emotions is saying some almost ontologically true thing about the world, oh, we're connected or we're not, or this is a good idea or it isn't, or I'm not having these feelings, therefore there's something wrong with me, which is one of the ideas that she teases.
Right.
Having or not having an emotion isn't data, isn't evidence for something true or not true about you. They ain't that powerful. They're very powerful, and I love emotions. They're wonderful. But they don't reveal truths as if there's some sage buried deep within our brains, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think the more that you dig into scholarship about what emotions truly are, the less power they ultimately hold. This is why I encourage checking out some of Lisa Barrett's work, and also things like Schachter and Singer's theory, which we can talk about in here sometime.
Yeah.
But these emotions are deeply rooted in our histories, our biases, our perspectives, our physiology, even if you wanted to get into something along the lines of pheromones or substances or hormones in a particular moment. And so we may feel or not feel them in a given moment for many reasons that have nothing to do with the other person. So that's one piece of this that I would certainly add. And then, of course, there's also the attachment perspective here. So before I get into attachment, maybe I'll let you have an in.
Well, I do see this question often, and I feel like it's a question that may have even come up in our dating group before. But
which we should say, we run a group together, Allie and I, that focuses on dating related concerns and people that are dating or coming out of dating or trying to date, etc. So we talk about this every week with people.
Oh yeah. So I guess let me just play devil's advocate a little bit to what you just said. Say you do find this person who you feel like is a good match for you in terms of like goals, needs, and values, and they're a kind person, sort of check all the boxes, right? And maybe you don't even have that many boxes, but they check the ones that you have that are important. But this idea of like attraction and this like just this desire to like be around them and kiss them and the physical aspect of it, right? Like, so let's say this person, like what I just said, they meet all those, check all those boxes. You don't really feel anything for them though, and you're not that excited to see them. Do you still keep dating them?
I mean, I think that there's still room to explore what specifically is happening in the relationship. And at least in her case, the Reddit question person's case, there was some attraction, maybe even a lot. I think initially they described it as attraction and then later changed the verbiage, if I recall correctly.
I think they described them as like conventionally attractive, like,
I see.
But they're not that excited about them. They're just like, yeah.
So we're using the word attraction in a couple of different ways, at least in the Reddit question. And I think there is room to challenge our views of conventional attraction. And
Totally.
Gosh, I hear people talking about types all the time. And I think ultimately we're trying to love a whole person, which means we need to love their flaws. We need to love them. Hypothetically, if you are somebody who wants long-term partnership, you want to love someone when they are older, when attraction grows and changes. You also want to love them when you're bored, when they're annoying. You're trying to pick somebody who you're going to be able to love in all of the different sort of experiences of life. If you're seeking for, if specifically you're seeking monogamy and long-term partnership, that is, which we shouldn't assume. But there will, if you date anyone long enough, if you marry someone, if you spend a long time with someone, you're going to be around when they are too loud, too quiet, not available enough, super annoying, checked out, overwhelmed, sick, like all of the above. You will bear witness to them making all of the worst. If you stay with them long term, you'll bear witness to them making all of the worst decisions that they will ever make in their life. And you'll just be sitting there while they do that. You'll see them make mistakes. You'll see them let you down, all of the above. And this idea of desire is great. We love desire. Desire is wonderful. It's not going to last through all of those moments. Yeah. Sometimes it's Tuesday and they're annoying the crap out of you and you got to deal with that. And that's where I think making choices that are more deeply rooted in, does this person help me be who I mean to be in my life more broadly, but also in terms of pursuit of goals, needs, and values, but also relationally. Is this someone who I can be successful as a partner in relation to them? And that's where I would encourage less of a focus on who they are and more of a focus on what we're doing together and what we're building together. Because that also could be the other issue here, is that maybe we're not constructing something together that has a lasting effect. But also, what does this do to me, and how can I show up in this in a way that I feel comfortable with? Because it's not, I very rarely am going to take the position that it's about the specific person. It's about how I show up in this and my degree of comfort in it, as well as what we build together. A relationship at the end of the day is this ephemeral, non-physical, sort of weird belief structure orb thing that exists between the two of us, and we entirely create it ourselves, and it doesn't exist outside of that. Maybe others have beliefs about it, maybe others could look at it, but we're making the whole thing up. Just the two of us, all of our patterns, all of our practices, just the two of us kind of constructing this thing together. Maybe that's the thing that we're struggling with, that we're not, I'm doing air quotes here, but feeling, is perhaps that construction of a thing isn't coming along. And can I use my values-driven action? Can I use my communication skills to bring this to the other person and explore it and give a shot to one another? Like, maybe we build this different. Or maybe not at all. Maybe we both agree not to build it together. But can we use our actions to be more intentional about driving this in a direction to see if it's buildable?
Right. Yeah, I think what I would say, I think, is like, if you are completely put off and disgusted by this person, you don't need to keep seeing them. Like,
Sure.
you don't. But if there's something there and you feel like this is a relationship that could be built on a good foundation and that, attraction can build, I don't think there's anything wrong with continuing to see this person and seeing what could grow. She mentioned in this question this, like, oh, I'm not feeling any butterflies. I feel like this idea of butterflies is also very like, because sometimes butterflies, correct me if I'm wrong, can signal like that this person makes us nervous and we're feeling triggered by this person, and it's actually not a good thing.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the experiment, but there was an experiment done back in the, I don't know, maybe 70s or 80s, where they essentially induced anxiety in people and got them to engage in more romantic actions. Essentially, they were more likely to take certain romantic actions as a result of having felt a little bit of anxiety. And that's kind of what I mean with respect to, it was something bridge experiment. I can't remember the name of the bridge experiment. Maybe we can look it up here in a minute, but it's another of the ways in which I think that we think these emotions are giving us some truth about this relationship. Ooh, we're feeling it or we're not. We've got this chemistry or we don't.
Right.
It's just anxiety.
Right.
Like in some cases, we might just be feeling some degree of anxiety, or I could be hungry, or I could be dealing with low T, or like there's all number of things that could be happening to us that could be changing the way that we're experiencing these relationships. I often hear from people that, if they're drinking in their early dates, will feel that initial spark, and then they keep seeing somebody and they're not drinking as much, and those lady, and they're like, it fizzled. It's like, no, you're not buzzed anymore.
You're not drinking. Interesting. Yes. Yeah.
And that's also, I mean, we can add the attachment perspective in there as well. If you think about the three major types of attachment, at least the language that is being used more contemporaneously, if there's such a thing as anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, and secure attachment isn't all butterflies in chemistry. It can and probably will be attraction, but typically, like, a good relationship can be pretty boring. It's just there, secure. I'm not worried about it. But if you talk to secure partners about the experience of and I encourage everyone to do this. If you know somebody who's been in a long-term partnership, seems pretty happy, and doesn't often stress about their relationship, ask them about it.
Yeah.
And ask them specifically about things like chemistry or boredom now. Like, you've been dating, Brad for 13 years. What about the chemistry? What about the spark? I'd love to hear their answer, but very often it's like, I just don't put a lot of value on that from a day-to-day sense. We're together. He's there for me. I trust him, and I so much prefer that security over sort of the whims of some emotional experience. Which is when you feel chemistry with a new person, there's nothing like it. But it can be a little drug-like, right?
Yes.
And is that ultimately what we're trying to establish in our lives as a sense of like stability and purpose? You don't have that with a parent. You don't have that with your best friends necessarily.
No.
They're just often there. Just
Yeah.
there, safe, secure, there. That can be a little boring, and that's can be fine.
Yeah, I think that was a huge moment of like a aha moment in our group when you said that line about like good relationships are often boring. Like, and it's true because there's not a lot of the times like relationships that aren't healthy are this like roller coaster ride of ups and downs and like
Yeah,
will they text me back, will they not, this like push pull, and that's where you feel this like excitement. It's like no wonder like the healthy ones feel a little bit boring because you're not being like thrown around. Like,
absolutely, absolutely. And how much are we attaching to the thrill of the chase,
yes.
or the because what's so interesting? Will they text me back? Is really interesting because I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling maybe a sense of loneliness that they're not texting me back. And then this one person suddenly and all at once has the power through very little action to provide near complete relief, temporary, but complete relief.
Hmm.
Wow, that's a lot of power. That's so much power. And now, so you do get that text, all that anxiety washes away.
Yeah.
My gosh, I love them. I love them for the relief and the connection that we feel. I mean, how easy can it be for it to get remapped in that way? When at the end of the day, I was dealing with anxiety, this person relieved it, says nothing about the quality of our relationship.
No. Mm-mm. It's just the ups and downs and the excitement and the anxiety and all that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So should she keep seeing this person? I don't know. Ultimately up to her.
Right.
I would say, are we talking about this with the other person? Because so many people feel a lot and say nothing.
Hmm.
Talk to him and see what it feels like to talk to him about it. If that conversation, let's say, doesn't go well, air quotes, doesn't go well, you'll have more clarity on why you're thinking about ending the relationship.
Right.
Because things will be said or perspectives will be had, and it'll become clear, and you'll have a more concrete reason for why you're stepping away from it. If it, air quotes, goes well and feels better afterward, keep going and keep doing that.
Yeah.
The talking is so valuable, but so scary.
It is scary. I mean, are you literally suggesting that this she goes and says to this guy that she's feeling a lack of physical attraction and excitement?
Well, I don't know from the question that it is definitely physical attraction that she's struggling with. I
Mhm.
think that's a little bit left open, but why not say something like, you seem fantastic. Here are all these wonderful qualities about you. I am noticing as we keep dating that I'm struggling a little bit with this feeling of chemistry or
Yes.
connection. What do you think about that? Is that hard for him to hear? Absolutely. It's gonna be hard for him to hear that you want to break up with him too. It's gonna be hard, and this is where like it's relationships and dating are going to involve pain. We just it's there. It stinks, but it's there. But perhaps he comes back and says, "Yeah, me too." Okay, then we're good. Like we got clarity and we're on the same page. Uh, Perhaps he's totally blindsided by that and has no idea why you're experiencing that. But in our willingness to have that difficult conversation,
Mhm.
maybe we can explore, what are your perspectives? How have you been thinking about this? I can imagine maybe in that moment he's saying things like, I thought we were going to get married. And it's like, well, we've been dating for 3 weeks. And she's been picking up on this like internal sense of, oh, he's got the cart before the horse here.
Yeah.
There's so much that could be happening in terms of attunement that we don't really understand and can't get perspective on until we start talking. So
Talking.
I'm guessing here, but so she, until we talk
Yes.
and we actually hear what each person's perspective is. The reason we don't talk is because we're afraid of hurting other people or having our own feelings hurt.
Yes.
Hurt's a part of the game. It
Part of the game.
sucks, but it's a part of the game, and talking is our way through it.
Yes, absolutely.
And then also making sure that you've got those other supports in place. It's one of the reasons. Sorry, I'm kind of on a tirade here,
Well,
but it's one of the reasons why we want to make sure that we ourselves have social supports while we're dating, but also why we want to date people who have social supports. Because if this person has no one else in their life, and we go to have this conversation, and I know that they're going to have a rough time, well, now I'm sitting here thinking like he's just over there like sitting alone in his room, festering, instead of he's got people to support him, and I trust his emotional well-being and skills enough to be able to handle that. I can bring up difficult topics, and we'll both survive them.
So true. Yeah, your person that you're seeing romantically cannot be your only person. It just can't.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
No.
I use this metaphor sometimes about the sources of support. If you were a boat in a storm and you were tied to absolutely nothing, good luck, and you're going to end up beached and crashed upon those rocks. But if you were tied to just one post, then you're going to be flapping around in the waves all over the place. That's going to be a rough ride, and eventually you'll probably wrap around that post and crash into it. So one source of support is often not enough, and it can be really damaging to you. If you're tied to two on either side, let's say equidistant, you're still going to be flipping back and forth like crazy in the storm. You'll be sort of what would that motion be called? I don't know. Like you're caught in the waves and whipping back and forth, whatever we want to call that. It's still a bit of a rough ride, but it is better and it is more secure, and you will probably not crash into anything. But if you could get three, anytime you start to pull too far away from one, you'll get caught by the others. Anytime you start to sort of like sway this way or that, the others will get you. And so like a good number of good supports is, having about three people that you can go to. They won't always be the same people all the time. People will let you down. People will come and go. But it is valuable to have probably about three good supports in your life.
Oh, I love that visual metaphor.
Yeah.
And I find them so effective in therapy too.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, before we wrap up, for anyone watching, you may be curious about the quote behind Adam's head. And so I think you should just explain what that quote is really quick. It says, "I'll take a bleak reality over an uncertain one."
Yes. This has gotten some reactions this week. I don't think all people would necessarily agree with that perspective, but I think we've probably both worked with the client in therapy that is so wedded to their negativistic core beliefs, the sort of the ways in which they are bad, terrible, awful, a fuck up, whatever, like those kinds of beliefs about self. They're so kind of tied to that and so wedded to it that they often won't let it go, and it can be quite difficult to work with in psychotherapy. I think the reason that often happens is the fear of uncertainty, that at the end of the day, we're struggling with I would rather be something bad than nothing, or I don't know what I am. And it can be so scary to put your story down and to try on some new ones, because then I don't know who I am. And I'd rather know who I am and know that it's bad than have no idea at all.
Yes. And I've come across that too with clients, and it seems like, what? I don't want to be tied to like me being like this bad person. Like I would rather just not know who I am. Like I actually often find it's the opposite, because that feeling of uncertainty of just not even knowing who you are and how to define yourself is much more scary from like an identity perspective than latching on to this like, nope, I'm a bad person.
I'll just be that.
I'll just be that.
Yeah.
I'll just double down and be that.
Uncertainty is probably among the most terrifying emotional experiences or perspectives that one can have. And that's why so much of our work involves helping people to gain certainty. It's and comfort with uncertainty. like
Yes.
a deep comfort with that uncertainty. Because at the end of the day, I don't know, you don't know, we don't know, what's coming. There are pieces of it that we can gain clarity on, but that's often internal. That's often like a sense of clarity on how I got here, what I'm seeing, what I'm experiencing, perhaps who I am. But there's only so much certainty we can add, because tomorrow's another day and I have no idea what it's going to bring.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, on that note, thank you so much for listening to our very first episode of the Delve podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you. Visit delvepsych.com, or you can email contact@delvepsych.com to work with one of our clinicians. Also,
we have immediate availability. We've got
Yes.
a number of people available to work with you from this or other perspectives, and we're happy to support if we can.
Yeah. Also, for more of these ideas, you can follow our Substack at delvepsych.substack.com. And if you have questions that you'd like us to answer in our next podcast, you can email us at media@delvepsych.com.
And that's DELVEPSYCH, delvepsych.com. So media@delvepsych.com.
All right. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.